Welcome to Leominster Access Television and Neighborhood Snapshot. My name is Bob Saudelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Our guest today is Mr. David Letters, and our neighborhood focus is the Mount Pleasant Avenue section of Leominster. Welcome, Dave. Welcome to LATV.
Thank you, Bob.
Could you tell us something for the viewing audience? Tell us a little about yourself, some biographical information, please.
Well, my name is David Letters. I grew up in Leominster. Just for historical facts as we go through this, graduated from Leominster High School in the class of 1965. I spent most of my life in Leominster except when I was in college or in the Army, and I currently live in Leominster in the south side of Leominster.
South side of Leominster. But you grew up?
I grew up on Mount Pleasant Avenue, and I was there that fateful day in April 4th, 1954, when they had the infamous, the very tragic fire in Leominster when Castle Novelty exploded. And it was that Castle Novelty was a factory, and it was right in smack in downtown Leominster, and it bordered the neighborhood of Mount Pleasant Avenue. The entrance to Castle Novelty was on Manning Avenue, and that was 3 floors there, and on the Mount Pleasant Avenue side, which was the hill that was raised above it, there was 1 floor of height of the building there. So they had cut into the hill when they originally built the building, and that was fortuitous because it's eventually, the fact of that, as I get into it, saved Mount Pleasant Avenue.
As you said, the building literally almost exploded. Tremendous fire. But for our viewing, and we'll get into
Yes.
that, but for our viewing audience and for people new to Leominster, where is Mount Pleasant Avenue?
Okay, we have a photograph, an aerial photograph of downtown Leominster. It's an older photograph of the time when this event occurred. But this, here's what was the Rotary, which is now Monument Square. They took the Rotary out and made a better traffic pattern. This street here is Mechanic Street. And you drive down Mechanic Street, and the Plymouth building, the large brick building, which is still there, and then Mount Pleasant Avenue starts there. It goes up the hill, it takes a turn, and it connects to Pine Street. And Pine Street, if you go down, comes onto Lancaster Street, which is Route 117, where currently there's a Dunkin' Donuts there in 2004. And the entire Mount Pleasant Avenue was known as the Mount, the whole hill, the entire hill. So we have, this is now Howe Street. This goes this way, and then it comes around the back. And then there's Short Street, which is short, and then there's Pine Street, which goes down, and then that also comes around over to Howe. It ends at Howe. And then there's Wilson Street, which is not in the photograph, but that was all part of the Mount Pleasant Avenue area known as the Hill. Behind that are the railroad tracks, which are not as large today as they are in this photograph, but that was a very, very busy railroad area. And this, just for a fact, if you follow the rail lines, this is the old train station, which was still active when I was...
The depot.
The train depot.
Yeah.
And trains would arrive from Framingham. Framingham was the big switch off. If you wanted to get to Leominster, you would take the train from Boston to Framingham, and then Framingham to Worcester, which would then connect to the Leominster depot. And also they had traffic coming from the north, from Fitchburg, straight through Leominster. But that was a very, very active train station. And during the war, the troops, they marched them from up this, what was the City Hall area. They would march them down the street, and they'd get on the trains and go off to wherever they were. So it's just this area above downtown Leominster. The building we're currently in is on Manning Avenue. It's the 5-floor brick building, and that would be right in this area here. That's the Plymouth building, and this building right here where there were houses, these were houses that were demolished in a fire. That's where we currently are, the home of LATV.
And a little sidelight in our conversation earlier, you actually did the staging on this building when this particular building was being built.
The reason Mount Pleasant Avenue is named Mount Pleasant Avenue is the view is so spectacular. And I would encourage all of our viewers to sometime take the time to drive up Mount Pleasant Avenue. And this large brick building here, and just go beyond it, there's a parking area. And the sunsets are absolutely spectacular. You overlook Monusinock Hill, Bayberry Hill. You can see to the south to Low Street and Hill Street. And then to the north, you can see to the far, to where the Monusinock Hill starts to go down again, which would be up in the West Street or the Lindell Avenue area, where Lindell would intercept West Street.
So
absolutely gorgeous sunsets
to the west.
To the west.
And what about
to the east? It's sunrises to come up there with your camera, and go down to the end of Short Street and look east, and there you'll see the beautiful St. Cecilia's Church. And I have photographs of the sunrise, and there's a gold cross on the top of St. Cecilia's. And there are days that it looks like it's coming up. The gold, the sun reflecting off the gold of that church, the cross on the church is beautiful. It's magical. It's beautiful.
So
Mount Pleasant Avenue is named because of the beautiful, pleasant view. And in other towns and cities I've been in, I've found other Mount Pleasant Avenues and Mount Pleasant Streets, and it's always a similar situation. There's one in Amherst, Mass., which is Mount Pleasant Street, and that overlooks what is now the University of Massachusetts campus. But when it was named that, it was just beautiful cornfields and a gorgeous view of the Mount Holyoke Range. So one of the best views in all of Western Massachusetts is on Mount Pleasant Street in Amherst. And I've been to other cities on both coasts, and there's usually a Mount Pleasant Ave or street, and it's always a good view. So that's just a touch, and that street was aptly named.
Aptly named. And that whole topic of street names, it's very interesting. If you look at if you wonder about these things very often, you wonder about why streets are named the way they are. And
Short Street is named short. And appropriately, because there were only two houses. When I grew up, there were only two houses on this street. Now there's a third house, but it's less than it's probably 80 yards long.
Yeah,
and then Wilson Street was named when President Wilson came in. And Pine Street was probably named because of the beautiful pine trees that were there.
So all these connections are interesting.
They're there. Pleasant Street in Leominster, Union Street connects the whole town together. Pleasant Street was first developed, then Union Street. So I imagine they named Union as the let's see, you were a teacher. That would be the predicate term of the consonant, right? Some English teacher's going to call it. But the Union made the connection between downtown and Upper Pleasant Street.
Interesting. Now, when did you live there?
I was born in Leominster Hospital in 1947, and I lived in Mount Pleasant Avenue from 1947 to 1967. I went to college for a few years. I went to the Army. I lived in Amherst. I was on the staff faculty there. I was in Amherst for 10 years, and then I moved back to Leominster, where I currently live at the Fallbrook Farm, which is formerly Tuttle's Farm, and someday when we do our farm show, we'll bring that in. But I live in a historical house in Leominster.
Yes, you do, the old Tuttle Farm.
Tuttle Farm, and prior to that, it was the Watts Farm.
Yes. Dave, Leominster, I, being on the Historical Commission, have gone through some of the things, and I have seen there have been some doozies of fires in the history of Leominster.
Most certainly have.
And you lived through one of those fires.
Yes.
Would you please explain?
Sure. Okay. This fire occurred in 1954. I was 7 years old at the time, and I can recount the events of the day, down to the minute as it happened. But what I'm going to tell you is not coming from the view of a 7-year-old, but from somebody that through the years spoke to many of the firemen, and they told me their views of how intense and how dangerous that fire was. So you're going to get this from the view of a 7-year-old and somebody, a 27-year-old, because I spoke to all the firemen. I've always been fascinated with heavy equipment, and fire trucks they turned me on. So I used to go over the fire department often, and they would the firemen, oh, you lived on Mount Pleasant Avenue, oh, I fought that fire, and how dangerous it was. So I'm going to just change the photograph here. And, they had the great fires of Chicago and New York and Boston. Well, this was the Great Fire of Leominster. It was in April of 1954. This is a photograph. Let's go to this. This is a wide range photograph. Excuse me. All right, this is Manning Avenue as it exists today. There's the Monusinock Brook, and this is Manning Ave. This was Castellano's photo studio, which is no longer there.
Would Friendly's be over here
Friendly's
today?
would be right in this area here. Okay. This building here, which was Rubens' clothing store, is no longer there. That's now the space of the Enterprise Bank. Yes. And all this area in here was greatly impacted by the fire in that this building burnt down. This is a home. All right, first, this is the Castle Novelty Company, and they produce the celluloid plastics, which are highly explosive and highly flammable. From reading the news reports and the fire reports, there was a buildup of vapors in the center of the building, and then for whatever reason, it just went off. And it blew up, and fortunately, it blew straight up. And that's fortunate because it saved the rest of the neighborhood. Also, the fact that it was a brick building, and I should tell the viewers I spent 25 years in construction, and these buildings were built so well. They were interlocking brick, unlike today's building, which is just a facial brick. These were 4 bricks thick. So the facial brick would be flat, but then every other brick would go inside, 3 bricks, which is the length of 3 bricks, and then they would build it up. So the brick building construction at that time was 4 bricks thick, so it was very difficult. And as you'll see, even after this fire, the walls are still standing. Whereas if that happened to a building built today, and this is not to knock it, but our cinder block buildings, which are only 8 inches thick, and they're 3-core brick, and they put a soundproofing and insulation inside the brick. I just don't see those buildings holding up under the intensity of a fire like this. And my sample is if one drives up Route 12 beyond Winchendon, as soon as you enter Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, about a mile up, there's a cinder block building on the left that was a steel fabrication building. And they had a fire there, and the building cracked. It literally cracked in half on all sides. So, and the building is useless, and it still sits there. Hoping somebody will go in and repair it, but it's been that way for many years. But this construction is what saved all of Mount Pleasant Avenue. And the reasoning was they built, as I said earlier, the building was 3 floors on Manning Avenue, but there was only 1 floor on Mount Pleasant Avenue. What they did was they cut into the hill, and then they poured in concrete with a lot of rebar to hold the hill back. It was essentially a retaining wall. And although the rest of the building all burnt out, the retaining wall stayed solid, which helped the fire. It helped the firemen out directly because they didn't have to worry as much about the Mount Pleasant side, although this house here burnt down, and I'm going to show you that in a second with a close-up. You can see the charred remains of a roof. Now, that was an absolutely gorgeous Victorian house, which was directly across the street from my house. This is that house, and the photograph this is from an older Leominster Historical book, Bob.
Leominster of today, yes.
Leominster of today.
1900.
In 1900, okay. This is the house that was at number 25 Mount Pleasant Avenue. And after this house burnt down, they kept the original foundation. It was so well built, and they put a flat roof on it, and it became another house. They had first there was 2 apartments, and they made it into 1 house, and people lived there for many, many years until this building was built. But that house there, that's the charred remains there. So it was a spectacular fire. Then when it blew up, that house literally ignited right on at the same time. Now, from news reports and from talking to the firemen and the Leominster firemen, and from news reports, when the fire was going full tilt, there were 7 fires going simultaneously. They were trying to put out 7 fires at once. Now, unlike a wood frame building which burns just so hot and it falls into itself, this had all the chemicals and all the chemicals and the solvents. So steel melts at approximately 1,000 degrees. It starts to melt. Today, all steel is fireproofed, and it will hold up to 2,000 degrees. What happens then, when this prior to that, the steel would twist and bend, and then your roof would fall in. So this roof fell in. So now they got a fire with solvents going, chemicals going, and now the wood roof is burning. They had 7 fires going. These other houses, I should put this photograph back up. We'll be going with 2 photographs now, Kevin. The other houses were on fire. This house was next to the fire. That house was burnt down completely. This house over here, that disappeared. The house on Mount Pleasant Avenue, there was it was like a ranch. It was a modern house. It was the first, quote, modern house in Leominster. This one right here, it was built like 3 layers on the ground level, and the entrance was on Mount Pleasant Avenue. That house was completely destroyed. Then the Victorian, then they had a driveway entrance, which was right here. It was a loading dock so this is on the 3rd floor high, but street level of Mount Pleasant Avenue. And that concrete, that lasted until they put this building up 40 years later. That's how strong that concrete was. This house, then the Victorian disappeared. Now this house over here, remarkably, the whole side is burnt out here. And in another photograph, I have the roof burnt. The roof is burnt out right there. They rebuilt that house. And that stayed right up until they built the Manning Avenue building. And then there was a small little alleyway. And then there was a very large tenement building here, which was damaged on the facial side, which would have faced Manning Avenue. But they repaired that, and that house stayed for another 20 or 30 years. It was taken down in the 70s.
I recall, must have been when I was going to junior high, I would, when I'd go uptown, I would take the shortcut through that area when the factory was there.
Right.
Dave, did this fire occur in the daytime?
Yes, it went up at noontime, which was fortuitous because many of the workers, none of the workers weren't at their positions. If it would have gone up any, 20 minutes either way, the workers most likely would have died. Nobody died in that fire, which is very, very fortunate. For everybody involved, the workers, the firemen, the neighbors. There were a lot of injuries, though. For facts, 40 employees lost their jobs. And although Castle Novelty rebuilt, I'm sure it was quite a while, quite a few, a long time before those 40 employees got back there, if they ever did. 56 people became homeless. 11 firefighters were seriously injured, but they all returned to duty. They were just lucky. If the winds the winds were blowing towards Mount Pleasant Avenue, and this retaining wall is what saved the whole thing, because we're so close. If the firemen that had retired have told me many times that if the winds had shifted, the big fear was that downtown Leominster was going to go. And the reasoning is on this photograph I'm going back to, this is Manning Avenue, this is Manusanac Brook. This building over here is Castellano's Photo Studio, which is a wood building. And when they built this building, they built a small concrete bridge behind that so the workers could work on the back side. And that little concrete bridge is still there. In 2004, it's still there. We used to take that to cross over the river and go with, shortcuts to go to the Plymouth Theater. And the Castellano's studio eventually did burn down. And not at this fire, excuse me. Yeah. But it was a wood frame building, and when it went up, it went up. But they were afraid that was going to catch, and then all of these buildings here, which were they were all brick buildings. Those were known as the blocks. They were all retail on the first floor and residential on the second, third, and fourth floor. Those buildings, which is now the parking lot and Friendly's restaurant, they were very afraid that was going to catch, as would have been the wood block building, which was in business at that time. I recall that it was still a very active building. They were afraid if the winds would have started coming from the south, blowing towards the north, we would have lost. There's a possibility of all of downtown Leominster going up.
What you mentioned, the woodblock building. Well, there have been. This was a huge fire in the history of Leominster. I've found out through looking through these papers and so on. There have been many, many huge fires. The woodblock building itself, there's a famous photograph of the a tremendous fire there. With the top, I guess, was burned.
If you look at the building today, if you find older photographs of the woodblock building, there was a clock on the center of the building, and when they had that fire, when they replaced it, that clock never returned.
So during Leominster's history, I think that there was a great fire. I'm not sure of the date, but I think in the 1870s, a large section of downtown burned. We think of how fortunate we are today to have firemen. They are really heroes. The equipment they have today, thermal imaging, the equipment. When this fire, the Manning Avenue fire happened, they had modern equipment, but not so modern as we have today. And in the idea of the mutual aid, you had mentioned something about. Tell us something about that.
The mutual aid, and this is from news reports from the Worcester Telegram and the Leominster Enterprise, came from Fitchburg, Lancaster, and Lunenburg. Now, Fitchburg was a much larger city than Leominster at that time, so they had more equipment. And also, I should point at that time in 1954, the population of Leominster was 20,000. So Fitchburg came and they all helped, but it wasn't enough to put it out. That fire, which went up at noontime, they still had they were watering it down 3 and 4 days later, still putting out hot spots. I recall that very much as a 7-year-old. And at that time, I was in St. Leo's school, and when the building blew up, all of St. Leo's school shook. The windows rattled, and we were all in great fear of, is this it? We were in the middle of the Cold War. We didn't know if it was the atomic bomb. Should we duck underneath our desk? But it was a very, very scary experience. So St. Leo's is a good quarter of a mile away, and the buildings, we all felt it. Quick side note, my brother Bill Letters, who was then 12 years old, got in big trouble in St. Leo's because the word spread fast where the fire was. And he ran out of school to get home.
Lived right up.
Because we were right there. And his story, they said, well, you're supposed to stay here. He said, no, I have to leave. He said, I'm afraid that the tires on his bicycle, he was afraid the tires on his bicycle were going to melt. And that's been an ongoing family joke now for 50 years. But he still has the same bicycle. So
we're so thankful that we have the firemen and the policemen and all of the public servants today who really, really do protect us. But just thinking of those, the firemen and those, I remember I lived on Central Street, and I didn't come up here for the fire. I don't know why, where I was at that time. But I do remember as an older person, there was an apartment house on Central Street that burned with a 3-decker, and now the bottom floor was saved, and it's a 1-story house. But just seeing that inferno in a fire, and I can imagine what this conflagration was like. Frightening. The firemen. It's wonderful what they do.
I've always tipped my hat to the firemen and policemen. They do a job that many of us certainly wouldn't want to do or incapable of doing. I mean, I tip my hat to the firemen. It takes a lot of fortitude to go into a burning building when people are running out.
It certainly does.
And it's a tough job. Same as being a police officer, especially today, 2004, with some of the things that are happening. I definitely wouldn't want to be a police officer. Well, I'd like to direct traffic, maybe. It ends about there.
That sort of is a good segue or a transition into getting into our changes, some of the changes. There are many wonderful things. Right. We live in a wonderful time. This is our time to live the present. But society has changed in many ways. When you were growing up on Mount Pleasant Avenue. You had mentioned to me it was like a family. Tell us something about that
Okay.
place.
You know, the hep saying right now with the community activists is that it takes an entire village to raise a child. Well, that's nothing new. On Mount Pleasant Avenue, every parent knew every child's name, and if any child did anything stupid, like throw stones at somebody else, they would call our parents. And at that time, you respected Mr. Smith and Mr. Guadagnoli and Mr. Brown and Mr. Green as much as you respected your parents, because that was the way it was. You listened to them. So there was you didn't have the fear of letting your child go out on the street to play, because everybody was watching out for them. And you know, we had, quote, we were known as the Mount Gang, but it was gang in a friendly term, as in Frankie Fontaine singing Heart of My Heart, and I love that old gang. We used to hang out as the whole neighborhood, boys and girls playing together. Here was the scenario. You'd get home from school, you'd quickly change out of your school clothes, and you'd get in your play clothes. Then we went down to an area known as the Grove, and that was a field at the end of Wilson Street, and behind Faracco's funeral home bordered it on Lancaster Street, and the railroad tracks bordered it on the east side. And there was just a large field there where during baseball season, you'd have 25 kids playing. You'd have a pickup game every day.
I used to play over there. I remember the Grove.
Football season, same thing. We just hung out down there. As kids, we made forts, and you know, we just played there. And I'm not talking about just 6 and 7 years old. I mean, I hung out there till I went to high school, and I still did after. I mean, I'd always go down and play a game. It was Mr. DeFelice, who owned the Banner Mold Factory. He used to send down a truck in the springtime with a big, a fence, chain link fence behind it, and he would grade the playing area out for us. And we would all cheer him on and thank him. And his two sons, Jumbo and his brother, now I'm going to forget his name. He's going to get upset with me. But the two DeFelice brothers who grew up on Lancaster Street, they were part of it.
Yeah.
And we all got along. Everybody played, and all of the parents always looked out for each other. So you didn't have to worry about some of the fears they have now. And it bothers me now that there are never any pickup. I never see kids just out playing. It's
Everything
rare.
Everything is so organized
Everything
today.
is organized to the point of I think our children have lost. They've lost a lot of imagination. There's I really feel that, and I feel that that's sad. And I think a lot of kids, if you have the opportunity to play with other children, you learn a lot from them. Up on Mount Pleasant Avenue, we had Catholics, we had Protestants, we had Jews, we had Irish, we had Italians, we had French, we had Polish people. We understood each other. We had African Americans. Our area was one of the first areas when the first Hispanic group to come to Leominster was in the mid-50s. And they came here for the plastic jobs, and they lived up on the hill, and we all got along. It was one family. Racism was not part of our ideal. Anybody using a negative racial term would have been severely reprimanded by our parents or any adult there. Yeah. And I feel that's great. It certainly shaped my life in many ways. Today, I don't think that's the case. You don't see the intermingling as much as we had then. I'm not saying that as a nostalgic fact. I'm saying that as a sociological fact. It's true. It's reality.
We've in other interviews I've touched upon this topic. The melting pot model of America is a wonderful model. It's an ideal towards which to strive.
Right.
That we are
and we were doing it at one time.
Yes.
Now it seems to have changed, and that is not good. Yeah. But things always change. I mean, we're looking at it too closely. We're looking at it right now. In order to know, we need another 20, 30 years to look back at it to say, did this work? I know right now Leominster's going through a transition, whereas there's a very large Brazilian population which has moved into the community because of job opportunities. And I've spoken to many of these Brazilians, and boy, they're a hard-working group, and they just want to get together. And They have their own storefronts now. They have their own bodegas, grocery stores, and here's a group that's really going to kick. You know, they're going to wail. Just their attitude. So the melting pot will work in this particular case.
That's wonderful, wonderful. One aspect of your life is the idea of volunteerism. You volunteer for many things.
Yes.
I know that during the Johnny Appleseed Festival, I was picturing it last year, you were at a booth for the Sportsmen's Association.
Yeah.
I assume you'll be down there again this year.
The Sportsmen's Association will be there this year. I won't be, because I'm very proud to say that my son is selected. He's playing at the University of Massachusetts all-band conference
Wonderful.
on that day, and I'm thrilled with that, being a UMass alumni. But
this idea-
volunteerism, this is what we had talked about on the 50s, and I am so impressed by our parents and the generation that preceded us in that, you know, my mother and father, my aunts and uncles, they lived through the Depression. They knew the sorrows and the agony of poverty, and they knew they had to work together. Then they got land blasted and they all went to war. And they fought a war that they had to fight, and they won. And they won because women worked in the factories and everybody got together. Then they came back, and here's where volunteerism really impressed, put a lifelong impression to me. At that time, in the 50s, the Little League fields were built. Now, we didn't have federal grants, and we didn't have big money coming in and helping it. What we had was our parents going down there with a shovel and wheelbarrows and maybe a backhoe here or there and a pickup truck, and they made these fields. You know, fortunately, a lot of people donated the land or whatever, but they made these beautiful baseball fields for us. Little League actually started in the early 50s. I know my brother was on a team. He was on the first team in Leominster. And like I played down at the field that what was then called the Solar Chemical Field, and that field's no longer there, but it was absolutely gorgeous. They had a green wood fence now that covered the entire field, and we had real dugouts. And,
I remember.
you know,
Joe Pilecchia, Mr. Joseph Pilecchia, was instrumental in forming the Little League. I remember it was a speargrass field, then became Solar Chemical Field.
Speargrass asparagus. They grew
asparagus.
asparagus there because it was so sandy. But that was an absolutely incredible field with a fence that was made out of possibly 1x8s, and then they had a rail on it. Now, this was all done by our parents who volunteered that went down there. You know, one carpenter would teach somebody that didn't know how to do it, would teach him how to do it. And they built that field. They built the 12th Street field. There was a field where the State Armory currently is. That was the North Leominster League. They had a great field there.
I had forgotten about that one.
There was a field up where the Pilgrim Congregational Church is right now, off of Merriam Avenue and behind
the
where
the
Methodist Church.
Yes.
Okay, there was a field there for North Leominster, and our parents volunteered their time to build all those fields. And I was a couple years too late for Pop Warner. I was too old for that, but that started, and now all you have to do is go down to Litchfield Street, and you see a field that's better than some college fields I've been to. And our parents built that. Everybody stepped in and helped out as much as they could. So they not only built the fields, but they did the organization, the administration. They coached, they managed, they had practices. They gave up their time for the kids, and that created. I have images. All of my heroes in Leominster are those people. Jack Crane, who worked at the Leominster
Mr.
Recreation
Crane, wonderful
Center.
Man. Yes.
That guy, he got paid for working 40 hours, and he probably worked 120.
Wonderful
Alice
man.
Pickford, who...
we had Alice on.
Yeah. There was so... I'm afraid I don't want to start mentioning names because I'm going to leave somebody out. But that entire generation gave their time up for the children. And subsequently, we had, you know... We had what nobody else had. I mean, it was really great. And I have to say Bob Cosboom, because through my life, Bob Cosboom ran a dance called the Tag Dance, which stood for Teenage Group. Another couple started it just before him. They ran it for 2 years. It was called the Teenage Canteen, which is a playoff of the canteens of World War II. But they had dances at Leominster City Hall every Saturday night, except for the summertime. And it was a quarter to get in. And you would get 1,000 youths there. You got every kid from high school, from Leominster would be there. The kids from Clinton would show up, and the kids from Fitchburg would show up, except during the football season. Or as they got close to the Thanksgiving game, they disappeared, and that was a wise move. Even the kids from Gardner would come down. And they had a dance, and primarily they had a disc jockey, and which I was for 5 or 6 years myself. And occasionally they'd have a band. But Bob Cosboom ran that he ran that from 1956 to 1974. And what was wonderful about it was that little quarter you put in all went back to the use of the community. I played football for Leominster High. They paid for our leather sweaters, which at that time was like $40, which is, today that sweater would cost $200. But they bought the team the leather sweater. They bought the cheerleaders their outfits. They donated money. There used to be the tag Little League, tag basketball team. So all the money that went into there went straight back to the community. And Mr. Bob Cosboom, who donated all of his time, and he's a hero for me.
He is.
And what I want to say, Bob, is as I traveled across the United States and spent a lot of time in the Army or in college, I'd always ask people my age, well, did you have high school, did you have dances? And really, did you ever hear anybody say, oh yeah, we used to have, well, 4 times a year we'd have something at the high school. But we Leominster youths were so fortunate to have somebody like Bob Cosboom.
I'm trying to get...
I know you used to go there. Bob was a very serious twister. He could dance as well as the best of them.
Not really. But Bob Cosboom, great gentleman, and I've spoken to him. I've tried to get him because he would be wonderful on this neighborhood for the downtown area. But maybe he'll change his mind. We'll see.
He's a difficult one. He chooses to stay away from the limelight.
Yes.
That's just his style and his manner. But and he was that way when he ran the dances, but nonetheless, he was there every Saturday night.
Certainly was.
Think of giving up every Saturday night. And
great guy.
He'd get there early, he'd make sure everything was set up, and then at the end of the night, instead of having the kids sweep the floor, which would be the logical thing, he'd say, oh no, you should be going home now, it's late, and he would sweep the floor at City Hall.
Yeah.
That's the volunteerism that really had a great impact on my life, and I'd like to see more of that. Right now, everybody claims they're so busy. Volunteerism in the community and across the country is way down, and it's sad. It's truly sad. I would like to see more people just take a little time.
There's plenty of good work
There's
to
so
do,
many opportunities out there.
And there are people volunteering, but there should be more.
There should be more.
Certainly there's such a need. There's such a need.
Yeah. As I told you earlier, prior to the show, my daughter's basketball team, she played in the youth league. They were having difficulties finding a coach, and I'm physically challenged now, and I can't show the children anything. But I coached her team just so that they could play, and then somewhere halfway in the league season, on the boys' high school team, one of the adult coaches was unable to fulfill the obligation. He had to leave town, and the rec department called me and said, "Listen, we can't find anybody. Would you just make sure they go be there? You need an adult at practice, and you need an adult to coach them." So they were high school kids, and as we know, the high school kids know more about everything than we do. So I just went and showed up, and I was their shadow there. But in just a few hours, if everybody could just, even Oprah, who is not I'm not a fan of, she started that Give 5% program, which seemed to have disappeared. But if everybody could give 1%,
right,
it would be helpful, just as you do with this show.
So, there is that need, and
okay, firemen.
Firemen.
Now, There's one point I want to make out, because this comes back all the time. It's just like racism. It rears its ugly head. Every once in a while, some bean counter from the community, some penny pincher, wants to privatize the ambulance service for the fire department because they think they can save X number of dollars. And probably you can. But this is definitely a case if you get what you pay for. And I don't want to get too political, but I am going to say this because I know this show will be shown years and years from now, and I want people to understand this later on because I may not be here to defend the fire personnel. Here's a real quick story. I was hurt. I had to be brought to Leominster Hospital. And we called the Leominster ambulance, and they came, and it was a pretty severe situation. I had a broken neck, and any vibration, any bump was bad for me. So they loaded me into the ambulance, and we headed that way. And they called dispatch and said, well, we have a patient, he's got a broken neck. And the dispatcher quickly said, well, don't forget that there's construction on Pond Street because they had a water main had broken the night before, so the road was dug up. And they said, yep, okay, fine. And they took an alternative route so I didn't have to ride over any bumps. And they brought me to the hospital, and these are these are real professionals. These are firemen that are trained as ambulance people. So they know the community, they know every road, they know everything about the community. So when you have this, you're getting two for the price of one as far as I'm concerned, because they go fight fires as necessary, and they're also licensed EMTs, and they're very well trained. Now in the same scenario while I'm hurt, once I got to the hospital, it was discovered that I did indeed have a broken neck. And they brought me to Health Alliance Leominster, and then they said, well, we're gonna life flight him. And I said, no, you're not. I didn't want to be in a helicopter. I've been in enough helicopters, and it's bizarre because I did build that. I built the landing area there, and I just didn't want to. I said, listen, I'd really rather not go in a life flight. So they said, okay, we're gonna get you there by ambulance. All right, now here's the difference. The Leominster firefighters, ambulance crew, was able to avoid all the construction areas and get me to the hospital without going over a bump. As soon as, so now they call in, now I'm going to UMass, Worcester. They call in a private ambulance company. And as I say, you get what you pay for. All right, they get me in the ambulance and they go down the street, and I'm still aware what's going on. And they get to Washington Street, take a left, go to the lights. At that point, I'm expecting you're going to take another left and go to Route 2. But no, they take the right, and I say, why are you doing that? They said, well, we have to follow a certain route. I said, okay. And then they immediately start to prepare to take a left to go down Priest Street, which runs parallel to Doyle Field. At the time, it was all under construction. I said, don't go down the street, it's all banged up. I said, I can't handle the pain. They said, we can only go one way. And now I'm saying, wait a minute. Now I'm strapped into a gurney, and said, if you go straight down this road, which is Route 12, said, at your next right, it's Route 13 at the lights, take a right, and that'll bring you to the same entrance off of Priest Street, Route 13, then you get on the highway. Well, they refused to do that. So, oh no, we can only go one way, because they didn't know the way I was telling them. So they drove down Priest Street under construction. Here I am with a broken neck, spinal cord damage, being bounced around in incredible pain. It's just a very sad experience. Then they get on the highway. They're going down I-190, and they get a call saying, you better hurry up, get to UMass. There's a car accident. We want you in such and such a place in Worcester. So they're doing 90 miles an hour down I-190, and I can look out the window, and we're going by what is now the Sterling Airport, and I know the speed limit is 55 miles an hour there, and the road, that's all you can handle. The road is pitched a certain way there, so the water always goes away from the runoff towards Wachusett Reservoir. And I'm telling these guys to slow down, the road's not ready, and they're just saying, you guys in the back, the patients always know more about what's going on than us. Very bad answer.
Yeah.
All right, they get stuck on 290. They take the turn off of 290 to get onto, I believe that would be Lincoln Street. They come down off the entrance ramp. I know they're going too fast. They slam on the brakes. My gurney is strapped in, but I'm bouncing around with a broken neck and spinal cord damage. I'm getting ruined. They drive over a curb. Then they get to UMass. They cut the corner. They hit the curb there. They almost flip over. And they bring me into UMass. And as they're wheeling me in, the first time I see a medical person, I say, what was the name of that company? And they told me, I said, do not, under any circumstances, let me be in them again. Now, for the rest of that illness, I was transported back and forth to numerous hospitals. And every time I was in an ambulance that wasn't the city of Leominster or the city of Fitchburg, it was a brutal experience. And you get what you pay for. You know, they don't know the community. I don't want to knock these private ambulance companies, but they're out there for profit with a capital P. And they don't know the area, they don't know the community. So every once in a while, they want to privatize the Leominster Fire Service, and they did it in Fitchburg, and it was a disaster. As years come by, folks, if this ever comes up again, and I'm not here to defend the firefighters, please keep the Leominster, or whatever community you're in, keep it with your own community, because they know the community, and there's more care there. Don't forget, it's like building a house. You want to buy from somebody local, because if you got problems down the road, or your insurance company, you got problems down the road, that gentleman's your neighbor. You know, you're going to run into them for the rest of your life, so they're always going to do you well. These private ambulance services, they have high school kids that aren't even EMTs, but they know how to drive, and that's it. I mean, to take a person with a broken neck and spinal cord damage over a road of construction is abhorrent. And I just say that in the long term, in the years to come, please keep your local services local. Don't subsidize them. I was thinking about this driving in. The last time they did it, they said they could save $200,000. Well, Leominster has approximately 50,000 people as we speak. So that would be $4 a person divided by 50. That would be, 8 cents a day? Am I correct? For the citizens of Leominster, you save 8 cents, it'll cost you 8 cents a day to have your own professional ambulance service. Boy, did I get off on that one, huh?
We are certainly fortunate in Leominster. We really are.
Right.
And as I do these programs, LATV audience we live in a really very, very fine town. And our ambulance service
the ambulance, the fire department, the police department,
right.
The school department. I don't want to get too political on this, but people complain about the taxes they pay. I have 2 children in the school system. They say it's almost $6,000 to raise a child, to send them to the school system, excuse me. My taxes are roughly more than $2,000. So I pay $2,000. I get $12,000 in educational benefits. I get a very professional police department. I get a professional fire department. I get trash pickup. The Department of Public Works does a great job plowing the roads, sanding the roads. People complain too much. Let's just get on with it, do the best we can. Rah, rah, rah. I don't care where you live, let's just get it done.
Well, Dave, I agree that we are indeed, we
started with a fire.
We started with a fire.
Just what a spark that made.
Just to draw our interview to a conclusion, a little bit of a preview. When you were a young fellow or a young adult, I am sitting here with an individual, a very articulate individual, an individual who has a very positive attitude, great determination to overcome your injury, really worked at it. I am sitting here with a person who at one time, and I'm just going to mention this because in a subsequent program we are going to go into more detail, at one time held 4 world records in roller skating. 4 world records in roller skating, an individual who roller skated across the country. So that is a subject for a future
right.
interview. Dave, I want to thank you very, very much.
Certainly, Bob. Always a pleasure. And he was a great dancer.
No, that's not so. I want to thank, as always, the folks at LATV, Carl Pimarini, Jack Sully, Kevin Moran, and all of the folks at the LATV studios. And as always, I wish to thank the LATV viewing audience for viewing this program. Thank you very much.